got two warriors fresh out of surgery from Vegas. Two good fellas here, Kevin and Johnny Sig. Kevin, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you. How are you?
I appreciate you coming on. I'm doing fantastic, man. How was surgery last week? How you feeling?
Well, I had a left eye 2 weeks ago, right eye last week. The right eye, I'm not seeing out of too well yet. So they said it could take up to a month. So we'll see. My left eye, the next morning I woke up, I grabbed my iPhone. I could read without glasses for the first time in like 30 years. I was cool about that. But my right eye is taking a while. So we'll see what goes on.
Wow, and you got right back into action too, brother.
I was working the next day. Yeah. So
I
that
saw
was,
that, man. That's the only way to be. Me too, man. Fresh from my surgery, I ruptured my spleen. I'm a drummer and I used to box. So, in my 40s, wear and tear catches up. But it's great that we're both doing great. And Kevin, I want to pick your brain, man. You're a very interesting fella. I wanted to know what started your love affair with combat sports, your journalism, everything that got you to this point. Where do we begin with that, Kevin? What got you into combat sports?
Muhammad Ali. I mean, that was easy. And if you could see my office here, I have Muhammad Ali pretty much all over this place, directly in front of me, side of me, over there behind me, on this wall over here. So I have a lot of Muhammad Ali, and I watched when I was a young boy. My dad fought when he was in the army, in World War II. And so he was a boxing fan. He was not a huge boxing fan, but he liked it. And when Ali came around, he was Cassius Clay when I first saw him. The first fight was Sonny Liston. I was a young boy and I saw that fight and I was hooked. I mean, the trash talk, and that was something that, you didn't have at that time. And you had a guy doing what he did, and as fun as he was, that was what got me into it.
Absolutely. The same for me. My father was a huge fan of Muhammad Ali, and in turn, a big boxing fan, and just growing up in the house with it all the time. It was for me that I first saw Holyfield and Bo, the first fight. That got me in the sport of boxing. As young as I
Yeah, I
was, I
covered that fight.
realized
That was one of the great fights ever.
that was a metaphor for life if I've ever seen one at such a young age too. I saw that. I'm like, what this man is doing, defying all odds and logic. Mr. Evander Holyfield in that 10th round was just unbelievable. To this day, whenever I'm dealing with adversity, I try to get just an ounce, just a little ounce of that, Holyfield warrior in me. Speaking of fighters, obviously Muhammad Ali, one of your favorites. Of any era, the modern era or of yesteryear outside of Muhammad Ali, who are some of your favorite fighters and influences?
Well, Sugar Ray Leonard certainly was a big influence. I loved all the four kings, right? So it was kind of hard because Sugar Ray Leonard was my favorite of those four. The Olympics, the style, and he was, to me, was kind of like the closest thing to Ali, right? So in '76 when he won the Olympics, I was going into my senior year in high school then, and just fell in love with Ray. But then watching Duran and Hagler, I was a big Marvin Hagler fan, and of course Tommy Hearns was wild. I first heard of Tommy Hearns years and years ago. I was reading a boxing magazine, and it was while he was still an amateur, and they were talking about, hey, this kid Tommy Hearns is going to be one of the great knockout artists of all time. And I heard about this fight. Now you can actually find it on YouTube and watch it. Tommy Hearns and Aaron Pryor, they fought in the amateurs. Just an incredible fight. If you see that, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. So I heard of him, and then when he fought Pepino Cuevas was the first time I really became aware of him as a pro, and just fell in love with those guys. But Ray was the one that I was the biggest fan of. So now when he's fighting Hagler, boy, that was tough for me. When he was fighting Duran, that was tough for me. But I love those guys, and boxing just has always been one of my favorite sports. Never my number one favorite sport, but always right up there.
What is your number one favorite sport?
NHL. I love hockey. I'm a
Nice.
I'm a big hockey. I love football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Traditional sports. But I love pretty much. It's easier for me, John, to tell you what I don't like, which is car racing and soccer. Those two. When I was in high school, my high school actually was a soccer powerhouse, and they had been in that area for a while. And I always would say to people, I said, there's, no sport that I want to watch where you intentionally let the ball hit you in the head. And that was my thing. Where even in fighting, you're not intentionally getting hit in the head. You do get hit in the head, but you're not intentionally doing it. And so I was never a car racing fan, never a soccer fan, but pretty much anything else you asked me to watch, and I like.
Well, we're not a fan of car racing out here in Vegas nowadays because NASCAR and all the traffic and everything it did to our city. I mean, it brought in a lot of money, but man, it was chaos
And
over
that Formula One totally sucks.
Formula One. And then for me, I could totally relate. I'm a drummer, and the reason why I pursued a career in drumming is because I hit the drums; they don't hit me back. In
Yeah.
boxing, I took way too many shots, man. And some people would be like, "That's why Johnny acts the way he acts." I did get
Yeah.
my bell rung a couple of times, man. And it's a brutal sport. You mentioned other sports. It's hard not to mention the UFC with you because you have such a strong affiliation with another amazing sport. I started watching that from the crib when they were wearing sneakers. The movie
Yeah.
Best of the Best 2 just came out. Bloodsport was hot. The 90s, man, action movies. And then all of a sudden, the UFC services, people are wearing sweatpants, drinking beer, high tops, pit fighting. They're fighting multiple times in one night. Kevin, what's going on? When did you start following the UFC, man?
Well, the funny thing was, like, I was not a grappling person. And so when the first UFC came around, I heard about it, and it was the way it was marketed, 2 men enter, 1 man leave. And so I thought, I got to watch this. So I watched UFC 1 through, and I don't remember exactly. I think 5 was the last one I had watched for a while. And then I saw a fight that it was Keith Hackney, who weighed 190 pounds. He fought Emmanuel Yarbrough, who weighed 605. And when that happened, I thought, this is like pro wrestling. What is this garbage, right? And so I quit watching it, and I missed from, like, say, UFC 6 or UFC 7 up until like the late 20s. And then Mark Ratner, who now works for the UFC, he was with the Nevada Athletic Commission at the time. He called me and he said, we are going to probably approve the rules of mixed martial arts. So that means that there's going to be MMA in Nevada. So you might want to get knowing it. And I had known Dana White from boxing, and I knew Lorenzo Fertitta from being on the athletic commission and obviously from stations. And so between the two of them, they contacted me first, Lorenzo, and said, "Hey, do you want to meet and we can talk about this UFC because I'm buying the UFC?" And I'm like, "Cool." So I met with Lorenzo, and then Dana and I. This was crazy, but they took over the company. And as I said, I didn't know anything about grappling, zero, because I had never watched any grappling sport. And so Dana and I would, in his old office, it was what he called the map room over on West Sahara. We would grapple on the floor, and he was showing me moves, and he would say, "Okay, this is an arm bar, this is a triangle." And we would be laying on the floor doing things, right? And we're knocking stuff out of bookcases. And when they opened Apex a couple of years ago, I think they opened Apex in 2019 or 2020. When they opened that facility, he gave a tour to the Las Vegas media, and I was there. And he said, "Tell them what happened." And I was saying to all the other reporters how when in Dana's office at the old building, how small his office was. Now in Apex, he has this massive office. But so that was how I got into MMA by watching the first ones and then meeting up with Dana and Lorenzo way later.
Who was your favorite fighter coming up? I mean, for me, there was so many. I mean, what Brock Lesnar did, I mean, it was just big at that time, being a wrestler and everything like that, and all the attention it brought in. It was just excitement. It felt like the first time the UFC really had that kind of power push, that power player, for me, at least, coming over from the boxing world like you. Even though I was a martial artist and I loved the UFC, I was always a boxing guy. I love the
Right.
stories, I love the characters, I love the personalities in boxing. I mean, they're second to none. And I'm a musician, and I've seen people in the music business, and those type of personalities. There's nothing like the fight business, So that's my thing. Did you have like a favorite fighter in the
Well,
UFC?
not in MMA because I became a boxing fan before I was a journalist. And then once I became a journalist, you can't be fans. I'm a fan of somebody's style and the way they fight and
Sure,
everything, but I'm not a fan of the fighters themselves because I can't do that. That's
sure.
not, accurate for me to do. So when I really became aware of MMA, which was 2000, right before Zuffa takeover. I wasn't a fan of any particular fighter. I was a journalist at that point, and so that's sort of how I moved. But you mentioned Brock. I mean, obviously Brock was a huge component, and George St. Pierre was a big
Yes.
component. But I think Chuck Liddell was a guy, in the early days of Zuffa, like I was covering it and I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and what was going on. And Chuck was a guy that took a lot of time to explain things. And he was good at, I was the only mainstream person covering it at the time. There were people online who were covering it, but it were all small websites, and they were people that had other jobs, and they went to work for a living, and they covered MMA because they had a great passion for it. um and I was the only me. I was working for the Las Vegas Review Journal. I was the only person at that time covering it. So a lot of the big names really were great to me at that time of helping me learn. Matt Hughes was another one, learn and
Yeah.
understand what was going on. Nobody was better than Dana, because, who else was grappling on the floor with me, right? But Frank Mir from Las Vegas, I
Yeah,
remember he
Frankie.
was the big star. He was a guy. So all those people helped me a lot to learn. And then eventually, at first, I didn't love it because I didn't understand what was going on. And now I can relate to people who are boxing fans who don't like MMA. And I can say, hey, look, I was you one day, but now it's awesome, right? And now if you give it a chance and think of it in these terms, and I can convince a lot of boxing fans who don't like MMA to kind of join in and get rolling.
Oh, of course. I think, for me, combat sports is universal. I like it all. I mean, bare knuckles, I watch. That's a little heavy duty. I want to pick your brain on the other combat sports that are out there with slap and all that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself there. You mentioned journalism. That's where I want to go next. How did you get your start in writing, and did you have an influence getting started?
I grew up in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and I was in high school in the 70s, and Watergate was going on when I was in high school.
Oh,
So right now, everybody hates the media, and they're against us, and, especially against, sports people, not so much. Although Dana's not a big fan of most of the media, right? But more, they're usually against reporters and other things other than sports, right? So I got lucky that way. But at the time, the Washington Post really had exposed all these crimes that President Nixon was doing, and it was like this big thing. And I thought, man, I love to write and I love to talk. I used to lay in bed. I would have a transistor radio and listen to the Pirate games at night, when they were on the West Coast. I grew up in Pittsburgh. And then I would announce games myself, and I would sit there and I would imagine games, and I was always the star of the game. And I was either the pitcher that struck out the side in the World Series to win the game, or I hit the grand slam home run to come from three behind. And I always had done that. And so then when I got in, I was a freshman in high school, really, when Watergate kind of broke. It was natural for me.
Do you have any music interest? Do you have any favorite bands, artists?
Well, I love the Beatles. I grew up, and so on my phone, every playlist I has some Beatles in it. I love Springsteen quite a bit. I'm a big fan of a lot of different music, right? I like a lot of different music. I'm an Elvis fan, so I definitely like Elvis. So thank you very much. But I like a lot of different stuff, including modern stuff. There will be times like I hear songs at the UFC. And when I was a kid, like my mother and father would say, "Oh, I hate your music." And I couldn't understand how they couldn't like this music, right? And now as I'm older and I'm their age when I was a kid, right? And I look at it and I go, I like this stuff. I don't know who this particular band is, or I don't know who this particular artist is, but I like the music itself. And so I enjoy when I'm at the fights and they're playing the music and all that. But I would, the Beatles are definitely my number one by far. Billy Joel's another one that I like quite well. So I got a lot of different ones I like, but those are some of them.
It's so engaging. It's all part of the experience with the UFC, and they're like second to none when it comes to production. WWE is up there, like the spectacle. It's so dramatic, when the music pops and everything like that. And just sets a wonderful tone, especially the beautiful arenas we have out here, the technology nowadays, the light shows and all that. What about films? Are you into movies, actors, any kind of cinema?
I'm not, when I was younger, I was like, I loved The Godfather, right? That was my favorite movie, as a growing up. My favorite all-time movie, of course, will say a lot about me, which is Slapshot.
That's a great film.
So like I loved it, right? So I'll every now and then still watch Slapshot. I love that. But like I don't watch a lot of movies today. Like some of the movies, the Oscar winners, and everything, I don't even see them. So yeah, that's I'm not a particular of a movie buff.
Right on. Now, I know you're a fan of pets. I'm a huge animal lover, as my shirt you can see. I got a Chihuahua. My Chihuahua thinks that she's a warrior, like the warriors that we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
You know. And tell me about your dog.
Well, he should be, he's right over there. He's with me everywhere I go. I have a Basset Hound, so my wife and I had Basset Hounds pretty much ever since we were married. And we split up in 2020, and we're still friends. She has three. I have well, actually, she has two now. One just passed, and I have the other one that I. So when we split up, the one that she has now that just passed, he didn't get along with the dog that I kept. So we figured it was the easiest when we split that I would take him to keep the two that didn't get along apart. And so that's what we did. And so I have this Basset Hound, but I have a lot of Basset Hound photos around here. And then I'm a fan of horses, not so much of horse racing, but I have Secretariat, a Leroy Neiman painting of Secretariat on the wall, like such a beautiful horse and such a great athlete, right? I mean, and if you were alive and watching the Triple Crown races in 1973, it was like the perfect place and time because this gorgeous animal, Secretariat, is this unbelievable racehorse. And there hadn't been a Triple Crown winner in 25 years. And he wins the Derby, he wins the Preakness. Now you're going into the Belmont, and it's all this consecutive. And it was on Newsweek and on Time Magazine, on the front page of all the newspapers. And, I mean, there's very few sports that ever can get that now. And here was horse racing in
Right.
1973
Right.
getting that. And then, you watch that Belmont race, and it's on YouTube, and I'm sure you've seen it, John, where he, literally they had to go split screen so they could show all the horses in the race because Secretariat was so far ahead. And you just, I was, what was I then? So I would have been 13, almost 14 years old when Secretariat won the Triple Crown. And I thought, boy, it's going to be common, right? You're going to see Triple Crown winners, and actually for a couple of years it was, So we had Affirmed and Alydar races, and then we had Seattle Slew, and then of course went back into the long thing. But so as animal fans go, I'm a big dog lover, and I do love my horses.
Absolutely, man. And I can tell you got a lot of passion for everything you get yourself involved in, and that's always great. So I just want to talk real quick, if you got the time, about modern times, where we're at with boxing and mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts just had UFC just had a huge event. 300 was huge. 301 great. We're rocking and rolling in the UFC. Who's the guy to look at, or what fights are you looking at and forward to the most coming up?
Well, UFC 303 is going to be here in Las Vegas on June 29th, International Fight Week. That's usually a week or so later. So this year it's a little bit before the 4th of July. And Conor McGregor is making his return. So that, number one, that's good for the economy here in Las Vegas. That's going to bring a lot of international tourists to town and just a lot of tourists in general. International Fight Week, UFC's done a really good thing partnering with the LBCVA, and they've created all sorts of events that go around that week that bring tourists in earlier, and they keep them here for 5, 6, 7 days, right? And that's great for our economy here to have that kind of tourism. And Conor McGregor certainly just pushes it up always a little extra notch. So that is a fight that when you look at it, you go, wow, Conor McGregor is back, and what can he possibly do? He's fighting Michael Chandler in a welterweight fight, so that'll be a new weight class for those guys. John Jones is coming back to defend his heavyweight championship. We don't know exactly when. I saw the other day that John said he has a date, but he's going to leave it for Dana to announce. Depending on John's health, I would not be surprised if we have a doubleheader of Conor McGregor, Mike Chandler in the main event of UFC 303, and John Jones versus Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title in the co-main event. I mean, it's going to depend on John's health and how quickly he is fully ready to go. But that would not surprise me at all because that's such a big event that you can have those two massive stars, the greatest fighter of all time and the biggest star of all time, both appearing on the same show in Las Vegas.
Right on, man. Absolutely. And we just got off a great fight in boxing over the weekend with Canelo, Jaime Munguia, recently Garcia, and Haney. Boxing is starting to come back alive again. A lot of takeaways from that. Me, I like what I saw on Ryan Garcia, a lot of power. Haney, it was a tough break. He got caught early. I think he never recovered. And for Canelo, I think Canelo fought his fight like the way Canelo does it. It was an interesting scrap for a while, but after a while, he makes it his fight. And I think that's what happened with Jaime Munguia. Any takeaways from boxing and looking in the past and looking ahead?
Well, we're in a stretch in boxing now. Think about it that we just had Canelo defending the undisputed title. On Monday, we had Naoya Inoue defending an undisputed title. And on May 18th, we're going to have Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk fighting for an undisputed title. So in a span of, 3 weeks, we're going to have three undisputed title fights. That is incredible. And for so long in boxing, we did not have that. And those are big fights, and you're getting the best fighters to fight each other. So when that happens, there's more interest in the sport. The fights are better. They're more exciting.
Right.
The stakes are higher. Sometimes guys' styles don't mesh, right? So it's not always a guarantee of a great slugfest and everything, and their styles don't mesh to produce that fight. But what you're seeing is we're going to find when this fight ends, we're going to know who the best in the world at X weight is. And that's what you really want. That's why the UFC has been so successful, right? They make all those fights where in boxing, you don't get the fight, or traditionally in the last 50 years, we haven't gotten those fights made on a consistent basis. Now they're starting to do it again. And given that, I think that bodes well for boxing's future.
1000%, man. I could not have said that better. And I think a lot of fight fans, people that are dialed into this, definitely agree. And people that are dialed in, Kevin, into the combat world, sports world, where can we find your material? You write such great pieces that are so well thought out and so easy to read, but are so, again, well intelligently thought out. And as someone that is a fan of journalism and reading, and that it's still a thing with you, and that is awesome. Where can we find all your content? Because I think it's important for combat sports fans to follow.
Well, I have my website is keviniole.com. It's KEVINIOLE.com. And I do boxing, MMA, and occasionally slap fighting on there. And I've been doing boxing since I was still in college in the late 70s. I started covering boxing, smaller shows, and then worked my way up to bigger shows. And now I'm doing all that. I was at Yahoo Sports for 17 years. I got laid off in December. And I decided, you know what? I wasn't ready to quit. I wasn't ready to let them dictate what happened to me. I had a great run at Yahoo. I love the people I work with. I love the opportunity they gave me. I got to see the world on their dime. And it was awesome. And so I decided I'm going to do my own thing. And so I created my own website, and I control it. So whatever's good about it, give me the credit, and whatever's bad about it, give me the blame. And that's what I like, right? It's on me.
You are kicking ass, bro. When the thing happened with Yahoo, and then the very next day, you're out there making logos. You got this whole thing. I said, I see what he's doing. I'm like, this is brilliant. And dude, I got to say this, not just because you're on my show. It's an absolute honor to have you on. I've been reading all your stuff since I've been a fan of boxing and just good sports content, media, old school and new school, man. There's no one on the beat like you, brother. And I appreciate you coming on today. I got to ask you this question. Tyson, Paul, what are your thoughts?
Well, I really like Mike. And I wish he wasn't doing this. Number one, I think it's 58-year-olds don't belong in the ring, right? And when Mike does it and he's going to make a ton of money, that's going to spawn other people to do it, right? Floyd Mayweather has an announcement coming next week. He's going to fight again. Guys that age do not belong in the ring. I'm glad that they're making money. But what concerns me about Tyson going in is look, we remember Tyson from 88, 87, when he was killing people, when he became the youngest heavyweight champion in 86, and that fight in 89 when he became the undisputed champion, when he knocked out a terrified Michael Spinks. That's the Mike Tyson we remember. But what you forget was his last few fights when he fought, Danny Williams, when he fought Kevin McBride and Peter McNeely. He was awful, right? And that is 25 years ago, 20 to 25 years ago for those fights. Lennox Lewis in 2002. That Mike Tyson wasn't very good then. And now he's 58 years old. What do you expect? So it's hard for me to know. I mean, I have to think Jake Paul is going to win the fight unless Mike runs out and hits him. If the fight is on the up and up, and I'm going to assume it is because Texas is sanctioning it. If it is on the up and up, then I don't see how Mike wins the fight, barring seconds into the fight, he just hits him with a haymaker. If it goes any more than a couple of minutes, you just got to think Mike is going to be in big trouble. Jake Paul is in his prime athlete, and while he's not the greatest boxer of all time, give him credit. He's an athlete. He's training. He's getting better. He's got good people around him, and he's improving as a fighter. He's still got an absolutely long way to go. But that conditioning, John, that he has, that Mike is not going to have, and people say, well, I've seen Mike sparring. What you're seeing is a 10-second clip of him shoe shining, and then that's it. And you're not seeing him spar 3 rounds, take a minute off, and come back and spar 3 rounds. And so I worry about Mike. I know the public loves Mike, and he's one of the most beloved figures, and I don't want to see anything happen to him. And that's why I'm glad from the standpoint that Mike is getting money, and he's going to make a lot of money from that. And if he doesn't get hurt in the fight, then I'll be happy because Mike made a lot of money and he didn't get hurt. But I worry.
That's kind of like where I'm at. I think that in the long run, what's going to happen, in my opinion, I could see Mike Tyson knocking out Paul, but having it be a no contest with Paul doing something kind of weird, Mike catching him in a weird exchange of some sort, and kind of not within the rules, something going on. Not talking about like a bite or anything like that. Paul's a strong cat. I give him a lot of credit. I don't hate on him. What he's brought to boxing, I think, is eyes, and it's good. I've had Amanda on my show before, and I think it was great what he's done and helped her career.
Yeah.
The women, they deserve a lot more, I feel. I've had great people on, female fighters on that I know they bust their buns just like the men do. And, I like to see everyone succeed in this sport. It's hard out there, man. You attend to these things. You see the behind the scenes. It's so easy for people to be keyboard warriors. But to get in that ring, man, it takes a lot of courage.
You have to have a lot of this. And you know what? Jake Paul is doing something that, say what you want about him as a fighter, right? And he hasn't fought a good boxer yet. And I'm going to say he's probably not going to fight a good boxer even in his next fight because the 58-year-old version of Mike Tyson is not going to be a good boxer.
Yes.
But he knows how to promote, and he knows how to get a fight out there. And if other fighters would pay a little bit of attention to what he's doing, right? The media can help you, right? They're not going to really break you in boxing, but they can really help you. And a lot of Ronda Rousey recognized that, and she used the media to make herself bigger. And I think that a lot of these fighters can look at Jake Paul and say the reason Jake Paul is as popular and is making as much money is he's using the media. He's doing other things, but he's using the media to his advantage. And I think, fighters should learn from that. So I think that Jake serves as an object lesson and Floyd Mayweather did it as well a lot of these guys.
Yes, sir, he did. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on today, man. This was an excellent time. I appreciate you so much.
All right, brother. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
All right, man. Thank you so much.